He's a corrupt judge.
In Tiny Finger's hush money case, the prosecution rested, and that opened the door for Trump's goons to make their case, of which they have none. Meanwhile, outside, Trump's Mickey Mouse Club were lying out of their asses. Well, the truth is no one could hear them because regular people have had enough.
Guilty! 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 Guilty!
It's not happening here today. I'll be following that Cass. Thank you, General. My name is Cass. That's a slice of what's happening outside the courthouse, and it's just a taste of what's to come.
Real prosecutor doesn't prosecute.
Go home, you carpetbagging move.
Inside the courthouse, Judge Merchan had to clear the courtroom minutes into Trump's defense because this goon, well, watch.
Merchan told the lawyers to approach the bench, and Costello could be heard saying on the microphone, ridiculous, just saying ridiculous while the attorneys are at sidebar. Then at another time, there was another objection, which was sustained. Costello lets out a Jesus.
And inside the courthouse, Judge Merchan had to clear the courtroom minutes into Trump's defense.
He tells the jury to leave the room. This is a pretty extreme thing to do. And he tells Costello in a raised voice.
Jake, the judge has just cleared the entire courtroom.
Yeah.
It appears that now this is escalated to a security concern, and the overflow is cut. We're not getting any more information. I mean, the fact that this has escalated to this extent, this is part of why there was disagreement within the Trump world about whether they should call Bob Costello. The only reason he is being called is because the client insisted that he be called. There were people on Trump's team that thought he would be too much of a liability. And
Paula,
the fact that the judge has now reprimanded him for staring him down, this is really taking a turn.
So, that's I was getting to that. He told Costello in a raised voice when he told the jury to leave, Mr. Costello, you're to remain seated. The jury leaves. Then Costello, after another sustained objection, Costello rolls his eyes, lets out an audible sigh, side glances the judge. The judge says, I want to discuss proper decorum in my courtroom. The judge says, you don't give me a side eye and you don't roll your eyes. Costello holds a long glare at the judge. Judge Merchan says, are you staring me down?
Trump is brought inside the courtroom, convicted felons, and even a Hells Angels to try and intimidate jurors, prosecutors, and the judge. Chuck Zito, the man who founded the New York chapter of Hells Angels, was in the gallery. Zito served a prison term from 85 to 91 on drug conspiracy charges. And it's well known that Trump has a special place in his black little heart for bikers, as they both share Trump's affinity for cheating, lying, and high cholesterol. Also, there was former New York Police Department Commissioner Bernard Kerik, who was pardoned by Trump after serving a prison sentence for tax crimes, and junior high hall pass monitor Matt Gaetz, all in attendance.
But he's already seated, and then they rise for when the jury comes in. I wonder if you got any sense of whether they looked over to the people that were accompanying Donald Trump to the courthouse today. Any glances over at, Alan Dershowitz and company?
You're definitely seeing, I would say, I noticed jurors looking out into the courtroom in general. Whether or not they were focusing on Trump's entourage is hard to tell. I will say, just as an observer in the courtroom, the entourage today is colorful, right? The Hells Angels leader is a very large man wearing a very flamboyant suit with a big dyed black pompadour and huge gaudy jewelry.
They're wearing mafioso uniforms. Look at them.
On very large hands. And he's sitting next to Boris Epstein. It's a little, it's not a Star Wars bar scene, but it's a little bit of a cast of character.
No, Rachel. It definitely was a Star Wars bar scene. Okay, so now Tiny Fingers is trying to intimate and intimidate, and not subtly at all, that should things not go his way, he will use force. And since he now knows he can attempt to overthrow the government and not one Republican has the balls to stop him, he will use violence and shoot more than just someone on Fifth Avenue.
In the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody.
As Secretary of Defense Esper told us, he wanted to shoot protesters in Lafayette Square, but was talked out of it. You think that will happen again? I mean, Who's going to talk him out of it this time?
Almost immediately, the president begins, shouting. He was talking about invocation of the Insurrection Act.
But at the time, the public didn't know exactly what the president was asking for. He also, as you say in the book, in your opening page, was saying, why can't you just go out and shoot the protesters in the leg?
In case you didn't know this, and Adam Kinzinger told us this on our Friday Frankly broadcast with former Assistant Director of the FBI, Frank Figliuzzi, the people in the crowd on January 6th were armed, and Trump knew it when he sent them to the Capitol.
And we gotta fight like hell.
By bringing thugs into the courtroom, all dressed like crime bosses, Trump is no longer pretending. While the Supreme Court mulls giving him immunity for, well, you remember this.
If the president decides that his rival is a corrupt person and he orders the military or orders someone to assassinate him, is that within his official acts that for which he can get immunity?
It would depend on the hypothetical, but we can see that could well be an official act.
Trump is preparing for not one term as president, but as many as he wants. But the Constitution, you say, it's unconstitutional, and trying to overthrow the government isn't? Here's where we stand. The Supreme Court is seriously considering, giving the president absolute power and safety from any criminal penalties unless he is impeached and removed from office first. And SCOTUS doesn't matter. The Supreme Court has no real power in a situation like this. You think MAGA will listen to Sotomayor and an 82-year-old Judge Breyer? Not if Trump and his army ignore them. And Trump's first chore will be to remove anyone and everyone he sees as a threat, from generals to admirals to the FBI and the CIA. And he can't be impeached and convicted without 67 votes in the Senate. And the Democrats won't have 67 votes in the Senate to remove him, so he can do whatever he wants. I'm not trying to be funny or scare you, but if MAGA will go to these extremes for a hush money trial, how will they react when Trump goes to court for attempting a coup? It won't be pretty.
All hell is going to break loose.
Maybe you knew all this. Maybe you were aware that this spray tan skin tag is capable of anything, but most of us are still hanging on to that same sentiment from the fall of 2016. How bad could this be? Well, over the last 8 years, you've learned. On January 20, 2025, Trump will take the oath of office, an ironic gesture for sure, then immediately enact revenge on his political opponents, the media, and any protesters he finds. He remembers having to run into the White House bomb shelter when the crowds assembled outside in Lafayette Square. He won't do that again. He will shoot them. But will that be enough to make a man out of Cruz, Rubio, Rand Paul, Hawley, Tim Scott, Lindsey Graham? Maybe. But are you willing to bet everything on a dozen or so Republicans to remove him from office? And then, of course, if we vote him out, he still has the military. How do you know he will go?
But I am not unpopular.
The last 10 years have taught us this. If you believe in just the words of the Constitution and not the spirit, you might as well use it to wipe your ass. That's where we are. I mean, you have this idiot here claiming to be a Christian while jerking off a guy in a theater full of kids, all while using a gun to explain her religion.
How many AR-15s do you think Jesus would have had? Well, he didn't have enough to keep his government from killing him.
And Trump endorsed her. What needs to happen now is happening in New York. This is the beginning of something that already happened. 1 million women marched on Washington after Trump's inauguration. Now, 7 years later, he's promising states' rights to imprison and even execute women for getting abortions, to ban contraception, to ban divorce, not to mention speeding up executions and deporting millions of Americans. 70 million people voted for Trump. That leaves 280 million people who didn't. And you don't have to be a math major to realize what those numbers mean. We have the power to stop him. I mean, for Christ's sake, he's a demented sociopath with diapers on. What part of that seems normal? And either way, it will be messy. Republicans like Tim Scott and Marco Rubio have already said they won't accept the results if Biden wins. Okay, that's their choice. But I'm guessing little Marco has never looked into the eyes of a million people saying, knock it off, you little prick. If Trump really thinks he can shoot someone on Fifth Avenue, we now have 280 million reasons he should reconsider.
Damn right. This isn't their Republican Party anymore.
You're in a lot of trouble, Donnie.
I'm Chip Franklin.